Hello, it is I, Skylarin. Welcome back to another video of me just rambling about one of my hyperfixations. We are still talking about Silverado, that wonderful Western movie that came out in 1985. That is my favorite film of all time. Written by Lawrence and Mark Kasdan, directed by Lawrence Kasdan, starring a lot of good actors. And last time I talked about a lot of things last time, but last time I talked mostly about the moral code of Emmett, the first main character we're introduced to in the opening scene. And I was going to continue talking about the moral codes of the main four characters, Emmett, Paden, Mal, and Jake. And today we're going to talk about Paden. So to start with, Paden is kind of a dangerous man to be around, it seems like. And I don't mean that all of these characters are dangerous. All of them are pretty good with weapons, which is danger. Well, they're not necessarily as dangerous as someone who's not smart with a weapon, who has a weapon. But point stands, they all seem like men you don't want to cross, but Paden a little more so to me. Like, of the four, except for perhaps Jake, he seems like one of the most laid back. Emmett's also really chill, but he's kind of just super introverted and not terribly approachable at first. It's a lot less, super approachable guy, and a lot more like he's really chill but kind of slips beneath notice. Like, no one really pays attention to Emmett until they get to Silverado, where people actually know him. I just find that interesting. Anyways, Paden, though, seems kind of much more dangerous because, like, yeah, he's a generally affable guy, but it really seems like once you've crossed a line with this man, there's no going back. My thesis for today, I don't really have an articulate way of explaining it, but basically, Paden's moral code seems to be a lot blurrier than Emmett's. Emmett has his very strict, I only shoot in self-defense, the other person has to fire first, and that way I can justify it in self-defense and be fine with myself from a moral standpoint. And he's still struggling over having shot Murdo first. But Paden is so much more violent for some reason. So we're introduced to Paden, where he's been left in the desert, has been like stripped of all his clothes except for his long underwear, and his horse and his gun and his hat were all stolen. I do really wonder what his outfit used to look like, because we never see him meet the other guys and get his stuff back from them, but he was like traveling with these four cowboys, and then they got in the middle of the desert and they turned on him and they took all his clothes, and he explains this to Emmett in their first conversation. And it's really, the contrast with Paden is so funky because he's so like friendly. Like, he has this conversation with Emmett where they're trying to figure out, or they're sort of just talking about the attack that Emmett had to deal with that morning, and that Emmett had to fight off those three guys that I mentioned last time. And Paden asks if Emmett has offended anybody lately, meaning, like, has he done something, like, killing Ethan McKendrick's father, which was the reason those men were sent. And Emmett says not for 5 years, implying that he spent those 5 years in prison. And he has sort of a warning tone of, like, don't push that too far. But then Paden's like, Jefferson City? Like, were you in Jefferson City? And Emmett's like, no, Leavenworth. And Paden's like, yeah, never been in there. Like, he's talking about serving time in prison in the most casual way. He's talking about this like they're not talking about prison. Like, they're just talking about places they visited and not, serving time in prison. Which, by the way, I'm fairly certain he served time in Jefferson City just based on that little conversation. And it's never really clear if Jefferson City is where he served time because he got caught because he was staying behind with that dog that Tyree shot, or if that was like a separate incident, because he said they were in Cobb, when he was retelling that story, said that they were in Missouri, so one has to question how he ended up in Jefferson City, because I have looked up where these prisons are on a map, and I want to say Jefferson City is not in Missouri. I don't think it's in New Mexico either, but it's not in Missouri. So, like, why was he in Jefferson City prison? I don't know. But we're gonna move on. Um, so he has this super chill and amiable conversation with Emmett, and Emmett relaxes pretty quickly around him, which is funky because Emmett's pretty guarded, usually. Um, and then they get to Turley, and, you know, they meet Jake and all that, and Paden's still being pretty amiable, and he... there's so many reaction shots when they meet Jake, when Jake's first introduced, because he is such a wild child. He's literally using his jail cell like a jungle gym, and Paden's just got this expression of disbelief the entire time, like, is this really the guy? Like, are you serious? What is up with this kid? Like, why is he like this? What is this? And then, like, and it, again, everything's like all hunky-dory. It's a little miffed. It's like, Emmett mentions that he's got to bust his brother out of jail because it's his brother, and Paden's, like, we know he's trying to go straight. It's comes up, like, several times throughout the movie. I don't remember if he ever outright states that. I know he talks about it with in his conversation with Cobb, but we know he's not really into that anymore because he kind of is, like, talking to Paden, not Paden, when he's talking to Emmett about breaking Jake out, he's just kind of like, yeah, I did a bunch of stuff like that, I don't really want to do it anymore. So, like, he's kind of averse to the criminal lifestyle. And then immediately after that, they talk about going to get drinks. They go into the little saloon, which is the same building that Mal got beat up in earlier that day, because it's like a restaurant by day and a saloon by night, and I think that's neat because by contrast, Silverado is doing much better than Turley because the saloon is the saloon all day. Anyways, they go in, and, like, Emmett gets a drink at the counter, and Paden spots one of the cowboys who jumped him, who was wearing his hat, and his demeanor shifts, and he's suddenly, like, stone-faced serious, and he approaches, and he's like, you're wearing my hat, and the guy tries to argue with this, and Paden outright threatens to kill him, where he says, the guy goes for his gun, and Paden's like, your fingers better not be tickling my ivory-handled Colt, or whatever his line is about his gun that, you know, was also taken from him. Goodness, I completely ignored the scene in Chimeo. I'll get to that in a second. I was trying to go chronologically, but I didn't. Oh well. So he's talking to the guy in the saloon in Turley, and he says, stand up real slow, and you might just live through this night. He's already threatening death against this guy, completely serious. And the guy seems to go for his gun, but Paden draws first and just shoots him. Like, the other guy's gun never clears the holster before Paden shoots him, which is very different from the situation with Emmett. And this is really fun when you look at it in the context of Paden's first fight scene that I completely forgot about when they first get to Chimeo, because in the movie so far we've seen Emmett's first fight scene where he only shoots people when, you know, they've fired first. And then when they get to Chimeo, Paden sees the guy who has his horse, and he runs and he gets a gun and everything, and then he goes outside, and the guy recognizes him and starts shooting first. And Paden shoots him in pretty clear self-defense to get the horse back. Like, it's to the point where the troopers aren't even like, you killed the guy for your horse. Like, we get it that he stole your horse, but you still killed the guy. It's much more like, well, it is your horse, so I guess we don't have anything we could possibly deal with. Because the other guy was very clearly firing first. There are bullet holes in Paden's clothes at that point. Pretty sure the only thing they could charge him with was, like, public indecency, because he was still in his long underwear at that point. But anyways, back to the scene in Turley. So, his initial fight seems pretty standard for, like, Emmett, if that makes sense. Like, he only fires after the other guy does. But the second fight isn't even a fight. That other guy stood no chance. Paden just shot him. Like, and then he gets his hat. And then he's thrown into the jail, and he says, you're making a big mistake, and Jake goes, that's what I told him. And it makes sense for Jake to say that they're making a big mistake, because Jake's killing that has him in prison actually wasn't self-defense. 2 people tried to kill him, one of whom had a shotgun. that Jake ended up killing, but, like, he was being shot at with a shotgun from behind. That makes sense to shoot the person. Paden just killed a guy because he was wearing his hat? Like, the guy was defensive, but that's partially because Paden interrupted his poker game, towered over him, and threatened him with death. Paden, like, for all that he wants to go straight, he still very much has that dangerous criminal mindset in some aspects. Like, you can see how he would have fit in perfectly with Cobb's gang way back when. And Paden is dangerous. And then the next time he's in a fight is when he and Jake bust out of Turley and they escape with Emmett. And at that point, Paden also has luck on his side. 100%. Because people start shooting at them, and Jake, like, ducks out of the way. Paden just stands in the street, being shot at, and just returns fire, and acts like there is no, like, he acts like he's not getting shot at. He just starts shooting back, and it's funny. Although he doesn't really aim to kill anybody. Like, and it seems to be that his moral code is, if you have wronged him, you're gonna die, but if you haven't really done anything wrong, he's not gonna try to kill you. So, because those guys, it was the deputies, I think, were the ones shooting at him, and he was returning fire, but he never actually, shot to injure them. And then they have their grand escape, and they get helped by Mal, and then they encounter the wagon train, and then there's the whole Strongbox rescue, where Emmett goes in and starts lying, and is like, seems wildly out of character. Not like it's impossible for him to do, it's just so very different from how he normally is. And Paden, meanwhile, pretends to be dead, slung over his horse the whole time. And then they get the lockbox and they run, and he doesn't fire until Conrad gets shot for being stupid. Because Conrad is just dumb. Like, sir, if you're gonna confront them about the strongbox and be super paranoid about them trying to take the money, wait until you have left the area that you stole from. Like, was he trying to get shot? I'm genuinely asking. Was he trying to get them shot? Is that what it was? Like, Mal's right. You don't know much about people. Like, sir. Okay, like, McKendrick is dumb, but he's also smart. I think McKendrick's problem is he's not very good at people, but he is smart, because he burns the land office so that he can obscure the deeds, and then he can claim all the lands. Like, that's smart. Conrad's just dumb. Conrad is just dumb. I don't know why his wife, who's the love interest for Emmett and Paden, whose name continues to evade me, I have no idea what she saw in him. She does have that conversation with Paden later about how she just wants a man who helps her work the farm. And, like, I can totally see that Conrad just wants to have a farm, but at the same time, that man is if that's all he wanted from that relationship, he is completely blind, because everyone else is like, that woman is gorgeous, and like, I don't know, Conrad is just stupid. Anyways, Paden, along with Emmett and Mal, shoots the scout sniper dude who shot Conrad. And I think it's funky that Paden is the first one to turn back to Conrad, and Emmett is the last one. Like, he continues staring at the guy that they just shot for a good minute. Not like actual minute, but for a good moment. And I find that super interesting, because you would think Paden, who is much more chill with the murdering, would stare back at him, and Emmett would be the one to turn. But it's not that way, and my best assumption for why that is because Paden used to be part of an outlaw gang, and so that kind of reflexive shooting is probably, like, outright reflexive for him. But also, I think he's sort of trained to check on his crewmates. Like, his immediate response, of course, as soon as he shot the guy, is to see how bad the injury is. Because, they're a tight-knit bandit group. Like, it wasn't one of those outfits where everyone's only in it for the money. there is some antagonism between Paden and Tyree, but I'll get into that at some other point, probably in another video. But it doesn't appear to be like have been present the entire time they rode together in the past. It seems to be more of a recent thing. Probably because Paden left and when Tyree shot the dog. So I think that's why he turns first, and then Emmett doesn't, which is weird because he's the one who like immediately took charge with the wagon train situation. And all this, my whole point in this is further evidence to the occupation that I think Emmett and Jake had growing up, because their occupation's never mentioned. I mentioned this in the last video, maybe. Paden, we know, is an outlaw, and he's a gambler, and he's trying to go straight, and he ends up working at the as partner at the Midnight Star on the gambling side, and he ends up becoming sheriff at the end of the film. And then Mal, we know, was a farmer in Georgia before they got run off their land, and then he was working in the slaughterhouses in Chicago, and then he went back to go to the farm, and we can assume he's still farming at the end of the film. But we never really see what Jake and Emmett do. Like, we know they're going to California, but we don't know why they're going to California. They're just going to California. And considering Emmett, by nature, does not seem to be a greedy individual, and Jake, by nature, also does not seem to be a greedy individual, I don't think it's because... I should probably look up when the California Gold Rush was, because the movie we know was set in 1880. There may have been a gold rush at that time, but, like, I don't think it was for the gold rush. Like, I don't think they were prospectors of gold. They may have gone in connection to the gold rush, similar to how, like, launderers... I don't know why that's the first example that popped in my head. But, like, launderers would travel there for the gold rush because there were people who needed their clothes washed, like, as a secondary business in relation to the gold, which I think is more like, not laundry specifically, but something secondary is more likely why they would go if it's because of a gold rush, not because of the actual gold. But, like, what do they do? What do they do? What do they do for a living? I don't know. I have a theory, but it's never explained in the film. And even in the script, I read the script, and it doesn't explain... Anyways, we're gonna move on. So, my thesis today is that Paden's moral code is based entirely on if you are someone he cares about or considers innocent, you are safe from him, but if you have wronged him, you're kind of in danger. And to continue with this, moving chronologically, he's not present for the shootout at the settlers' potluck, what have you, but he is present for the confrontation Jake and Tyree have immediately after that, which, by the way, I am absolutely certain both Jake and Tyree are drunk in that scene, or at least somewhat intoxicated, because that is the quietest we have ever seen Jake in this entire film, aside from, you know, his stealth kill at the end of the film. But that's because he's still very energetic in that scene, and this is the most, like, not energetic we've seen him. Not that he's tired, he's just more on everyone else's speed. And also, in that scene, Tyree is sort of slouched, I guess. Like, he just kind of looks drunk. And in that scene, there is no actual gun firing, but Paden pulls Tyree's gun from his holster and holds it on him, and then they have this whole confrontation, and I have many thoughts about that scene, because in the script, it's very clear that, like, Tyree is supposed to be the psychopathic man-child, like, dragon to Cobb. Like, he's supposed to be the crazy one, the like, very evil guy. Like, Cobb's evil, but, like, Tyree's really evil. And, you know, in the backstory, he shot a dog. He's not a great person, but the way he's portrayed in the film by Jeff Fahey, and there's this intensity to his interactions with Paden and some of the other stuff, and even some scenes in the script, where I'm like, yeah, I don't think he's actually crazy. I think there's a lot more to Tyree, which I will get into in a different video. But anyways, so they have that little confrontation. Tyree holds the gun to Paden's chin and basically begs for an excuse to shoot him. But he doesn't, so he leaves. You know, he backs down. He leaves. And then Paden just moves on with his night like that didn't happen, like he wasn't almost shot in the face. And then I think the next fight he's in is the assault on McKendrick's ranch, because after that, like, I have not watched the movie in a minute because I don't have easy access to it at the moment. But I'm pretty sure after that, Emmett gets abused, and then Mal gets captured, and then the house burns down, and Jake is captured, and Augie's kidnapped, and Paden is emotionally blackmailed and he drinks an entire bottle of whiskey by himself. And then the next morning they go on that raid, and it's already pretty late at night by the time he was done drinking whiskey. So, my question is he still intoxicated or is he hungover? And if he's neither, how is that? He drank the whole bottle of whiskey. This man should be, like, he goes through the entire final fight sequence probably hungover, and I think that's hilarious. Because it is. So, the next thing is the assault, and as I mentioned before, it's sort of an all-out thing, so I don't really count it towards these morality videos. And there's no real, like... He does have a really cool combat role in the barn when he's working with Jake, because Jake drops that sack of something to get the two guys' attention, and he shoots him, and then, Paden does a really cool sideways combat roll to shoot the third guy, and that's just a dope moment. But none of that's really personal, so we're gonna move on from that. And then he has his final showdown with Cobb, where he's pretty remorseful about it, because Cobb is one of the people he cares about. But Cobb threatened Stella, and Cobb was manipulating him emotionally, blackmailing him emotionally, to keep him from getting... God, they literally have a conversation where Cobb practically bribes Paden by giving him an advance in his pay, and then is like, by the way, those friends you came to town with are causing trouble. I might have to shoot them. And it's nothing personal. Stay out of it. Don't worry about it. They're probably gonna get killed. But don't worry about it. Just stay out of it. It'll be fine. And then when Paden doesn't stay out of it, when he refuses to stay out of it, Cobb's like, well, if you keep getting involved, I'm just gonna do something to Stella. And like, at that, and then Paden's, like, really bothered by this, because we see him drink an entire bottle of whiskey and just sulk for, like, at least an hour. At least. Until, Stella tells him, basically, I don't care that Cobb threatens me. What you have to do is kill him if you want people to be safe. And you can see by his expression when she basically tells him to kill him that the thought of killing Cobb had not occurred to him, which I think is rather indicative of how close-knit Cobb's old bandit group used to be. But at this point, Paden, the people he values are no longer Cobb and Tyree and their gang. It is now Emmett and Mal and and Jake and Stella. Like, his allegiance has shifted, and Cobb doesn't seem to understand this very well, which leads me to have thoughts about how Cobb interacts with other people, because I don't think that man is necessarily neurotypical. But that's for another video. So he goes and he has this showdown with Cobb, and like, you can tell he's not happy about it, but also at that point in time, he has no remorse, he has no regrets, he has no hesitance. He pulls the trigger effortlessly, I mean, he puts the pistol back in his holster like it weighs 1,000 pounds, I think like it weighs 100 pounds, I think is how it's described in the script, which they pretty accurately capture on the film. But he does not seem broken up about killing Cobb. He doesn't like that he had to. His hand was a little bit forced, but there is no remorse there. And that's what I think is up with Paden, which makes him a little concerning as a sheriff at the end of the film, because, you know, he's sheriff at the end of the film, and we can clearly see if you have crossed him, or if you've wronged him, or if he sees need for you to die, he has no qualms about it. He has no qualms at all about it, which is concerning, to say the least. So, I'm pretty sure that's kind of it about his moral code. He's trying to escape his past banditry and, like, go straight and be, like, a professional gambler, or, like, run the gambling, because he loves gambling. He loves playing games and stuff like that, and by playing games I mean, like, cards, not, like, mind games, whatever. He clearly enjoys it, and so he's trying to work there legitimately, rather than, you know, whatever Cobb was up to. And I don't think he's all the way there, though, and I'm not saying he's gonna be a crooked sheriff like Cobb was. I'm just saying part of that sort of cold, heartless killer that he was is still there, and we can see that when he kills the guy who had his hat and his gun. Like, that was almost outright murder. I do think it's interesting to see that in the background, when he's having the confrontation, Emmett is at the bar, and you can see when he notices that things are getting tense between Paden and this other guy, he moves his jacket to sort of show his pistol. Like, if something happens, he's also shooting. But Emmett never shoots, because the other guy didn't shoot first, because Paden shot first, before the guy could clear the gun from his holster. Haha. So, I also want to comment, in the final duel between Paden and Cobb, like, Cobb had threatened Stella, and I've watched, like, 3 different YouTube movie reviews of this film, and every single one, when Stella comes up to watch this duel, they're like, "What are you doing? Get out of the way!" Because they're, like, all convinced that, Cobb's going to shoot her. And I'm like, probably not. Like, he did threaten her, but he also cares about her. Stella is also someone he likes. Like, when he first sees Paden and Stella interacting in the Midnight Star, when we first find out he's in Silverado, he says, "What do you know, 2 of my favorite people talking to each other." Which I also want to comment. We never find out if Cobb considers Tyree as one of his favorite people, and there's a whole dynamic between Cobb and Tyree and Paden, and, like, I have opinions about it. Like, there's so much to that dynamic. It's so interesting and so good. But, moving on from that, I don't think Cobb was going to shoot Stella. Like, he was threatening her, but to me as a kid watching this film, it always sounded more like he's gonna kick her out of the saloon. You know, because he does make the comment about that when he gives Paden the money and his, like, advanced, not salary, but paycheck. Except it's not a check, because it's a bunch of coins in a pouch. You know what I mean? When he gives him his advanced pay, and he says, you know, you could probably run it without Stella, and Paden's like, this is her life. I'll go before she does. You can kind of tell Cobb was testing him there. And Paden maybe knew. I think Paden maybe knew, because Cobb is emotionally manipulative. We see this throughout the film. And I think Paden sort of is aware of this and is familiar with it, having, you know, been one of Cobb's bandits for a long time. But because of that, it, like, hint that he would maybe kick Stella out. When he threatened Stella later, I always assumed that's what he was implying. That he was just gonna, you know, kick out Stella from the saloon. I wasn't expecting him to ever shoot her. Like, he was trying to find her when she was taking care of Ray, but I think he just wanted to find her so he could find out where Ray was. I also don't know what he wanted with Ray. She'd been shot in the stomach. Like, I guess he wanted to find out where her brother was. But, you know, I don't know. I don't know. Also, it just occurred to me, Stella sends Phoebe out to find Doc Skinner, and then Stella herself goes out to get Doc Skinner because Phoebe hasn't come back with the doctor yet, and that's when Slick sees her and like goes in there or whatever, and that's how Stella comes across the final duel. But we never really see Phoebe again until like she kisses Jake in the ending, and I think the reason for that is because there was a scene in the script that was not in the film where she runs into Tyree, who's like, "What are you doing out? There's a bunch of gunfights about to happen. You need to get somewhere safe," and proceeds to escort her somewhere safe. In the script, it's implied to be like threatening on his part, but also he's showing concern. And also with how Jeff Fahey played him, and the one moment that they have alone together is him looking at her during the fire scene. There's no dialogue between them, but that's like the only moment. But based on that one, like their expressions and their body language in that one moment, what you can tell in the script, Phoebe's supposed to be scared of him. In the film, Phoebe's kind of clearly not scared of him. She's just kind of upset about what's going on. I don't think he was being threatening. Had that scene been filmed, I don't think he would have been threatening towards Phoebe. I think he would have been just like, "What are you doing? You're gonna get hurt. Let's go get you somewhere." But my whole point was that's why Phoebe never finds Doc Skinner, is because Tyree's like, "You're gonna get shot. Go inside," and so Stella has to go, and it's like, fine. That was unrelated to the topic at hand. So, main point. Paden's moral code is simultaneously simpler and also more complicated than Emmett's, because Emmett's is very strict and very consistent, and Paden's just seems to be, if he likes you, he'll protect you. If you've wronged him, he will shoot you. Full stop. Just don't mess with that man. Like, he seems really calm, and then he's just, like, stone cold murderous. The duality of a former criminal. You can see how he was a bad guy previously. It's pretty evident. So that's the whole thing on Paden's moral code. We're gonna continue next time I have the opportunity to record with Mal's, which I definitely need to look more into because it's not super clear in the film. It's not as cut and dry as like Emmett's or Jake's or even Paden's. Not that Paden's was all that cut and dry. It was like torn and damp, and but like Mal's is a little bit more complicated. What I think it is that Mal seems like a fleshed out character, like he's got his whole revenge story and everything, but he also, when you actually pay attention to it, there's not as much nuance with him as there is with the others, which makes it kind of hard to figure out some stuff about him, which is kind of sad because he was the black guy. So anyways, we'll continue next time with Mal in the little mini-series of moral codes and gunfights and stuff. And I have so much to talk about with Tyree and Cobb and Paden. But at a later date. Farewell.